Are you frustrated about your sales performance? Do you have the right people on your team? Are you stuck at a routine in terms of business development? Sandler Training is a global leader in sales and business development training and has been creating solutions and accelerating the success of high achievers for over 30 years. If it's time to take your business to the next level, contact Sandler Training at 801-639-0488. 801-639-0488. Is your business struggling with the cost of an employer-sponsored health insurance plan? Learn how your business and employees may benefit from new rules under the Affordable Care Act. There's no reason for you to continue bearing this unnecessary cost. Call the experts at Summit Risk Management and Insurance, 801-671-2431. That's 801-671-2431. Learn more at www.summit-risk.com. That's summit-risk.com.
If your business doesn't have social and mobile marketing strategies in today's digital marketing place, then you're quickly getting left behind. Don't get left behind, get Social 5. Social 5's team of professional writers, graphic artists, and tech experts helps businesses with mobile, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, email, SEO, campaigns, contests, plus more. For a free consultation, go to social5.com. Don't be invisible in today's digital marketplace. Get Social 5.
Why is understanding your wealth and managing it important to you? Because you have worked hard to get where you are and you have goals for your future and maintaining your standard of living. At Foresight Wealth Management, we care about providing our clients with impartial advice and solutions that work with their goals in mind. Securities offered through Securities Service Network Incorporated, investment advisory services offered through Foresight Wealth Management. For more information, call 801-462-2200 or visit at www.foresightmanagement.com.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth.
Good morning, Utah small business owners. Welcome to the Small Business Hour with your hosts, Mark Hunter and Chris Brown. It's time for your business to go from small to large.
Good morning, Utah small business owners. This is Chris Brown here with my good friend and much taller than me, Mark Hunter. And when you're this close, it sort of intimidates me a little bit.
Sorry about that.
Anyway, welcome to the Utah Small Business Hour here on K-Talk Radio. And as always, our objective here is to help support, promote, and educate Utah small businesses. And we do that a variety of ways, one of which is with our radio show. And today the show's going to be a little bit different because it's just going to be Mark and I.
Yep.
But we're going to be talking about the Affordable Care Act, which happens to be Obamacare, as a lot of people call it, and how it affects small businesses, big businesses, people who are just self-employed.
And just individuals.
Just individuals, yeah. So before we get into our discussion today, let's go ahead and mention some new sponsors that we have for our program, because we're always really happy to have new sponsors. They help make the show possible.
Right. So we've got Mountain Star Payment Processing, Troy, who's the owner of Mountain Star, Chris, and we're actually
He's going to be on a show coming up soon.
Yep, he's going to be on a show, and we're looking actually to use their service personally. So
yeah.
You can reach him. They've got an interesting website. It's mstarpp.com. So Mountain Star Payment Processing, and their phone number is 801-735-9207. And what we're learning is there's a lot of differences between payment processing companies. So we're talking about credit card processing companies, not only from the cost, but also from the service standpoint and compliance.
Right, which is a big concern, and Mark and I have had various projects over the years where we've, it's just a lot easier when you have people sign up online to just have them pay right then, and we've used different services, and we're maybe going to try and do something a little more sophisticated now with Mountain Star.
Yeah, so they're our new sponsor, and we look forward to working with them. So again, we recommend people to support our sponsors and get involved. They also help us with our workshops. Speaking of which, we're having one Or
we had one yesterday.
And so we'll be having one. Might skip December, but we'll have one coming.
And
up
those
shortly.
workshops, once again, they're educational. It's not a product pitch. It's just different subject matter experts. Mark and I were a subject matter experts this week, along with Rob Wellman from Social 5, talking about social media. And it was
and the Affordable Care Act, which we'll talk about
right.
today.
So this is our Affordable Care Act week, and there's a reason for that, which we'll talk about in a moment.
And then our second sponsor, of course, Kent Christensen he's one of the partners over there at Haney & Company. They're a CPA firm. I've used them for years personally. I've got nothing but good to say about Kent and Haney. We've done a number of workshops with them, and they do a great job, whether it be from tax standpoint or audit. If you're a company that has to have outside auditing,
independent audit, yeah.
And so Kent, again, I've worked with him for many, many years, probably 15, 20 years. So he's great to work with, and the company is very reputable. They were listed, I think, in the top 10 or 12 CPA firms in the state recently. I think it was in the Utah Business Magazine or one of those publications. So they can be reached at Haney, Haynie, CPAs, so CPAS.com, HaneyCPAS.com, or calling 801-972-4800. And ask for Kent and tell them Mark Hunter and Chris Brown sent you over from the radio show, and they can help businesses as well as individuals. So
yeah, Eric over there has helped me on some personal issues. I have a complicated tax situation, and it's always good to get some good advice. So let's go ahead and dive into our topic. Speaking of advice, and the Affordable Care Act has been in the news for years. And why are we talking about it this week? Well, the reason we're talking about it this week is for a couple reasons. One, we just had an election, and we're going to talk a little bit about what some of the impacts of the election might be on the ACA. I think there are some things that there's a decent likelihood could change, but there's other things that in my opinion there's no chance whatsoever are going to change.
So we'll make sure we identify what's our opinion versus
what's our opinion, what's versus factual. But I did want to bring that up a little bit because that's one of the things that people often ask us is, what do we think is going to happen to this part or that part or the other part? And so far we've done pretty good on our predictions, I think.
Well, a lot of people wonder if the whole thing is going to go away, and we can talk about that, but with the change, I don't think either of us think that the whole thing will go away. I've got my personal opinion. I'll leave that out of this discussion.
But there could be changes at the margins, and some of those could be good for business, and so that's not a bad thing to talk about. But the other reason we want to talk about it is because open enrollment began on Saturday.
Yeah.
And so this is a time of year when it's good for any individuals who aren't getting coverage through work primarily, but also people who maybe own a small business or work at a small business that might want to consider making a change to their employer-sponsored plan. And we're going to talk about some of those dynamics.
So we'll be
program.
Yeah, we'll be talking about from a large employer's perspective,
right,
from a small employer's perspective, which is defined as small employers fewer than 50 full-time equivalents, large is above that, and then also from an individual standpoint. So that affects everybody, any listener who's listening to us. So stay tuned. You want to?
Yeah, a lot of people say, "Hey, I don't want to have anything to do with Obamacare," and I get that, but you don't really have a choice.
Yeah, every health insurance plan in this country now is affected by quote unquote Obamacare.
Yeah, and so there isn't really any opting. Well, there isn't. Well, I guess there is an opt out, which is you could just pay the penalty.
Which, by the way, is going up to 2% of your household income starting January of 2015. So
correct. So I think a lot of people are still. Let's go ahead and start with that, Mark. Let's talk about the what's called the individual mandate, and the technical term for this is called the individual responsibility payment or something like that. And when you're filing your tax returns early next year, for some of you, this is going to be sort of the first time you've seen this. Now, if you've had insurance for 2014. No big deal. You don't owe a penalty. Life's good. However, if you've been going through 2014 or through a portion of 2014 without insurance, then you may owe that penalty. Now, for 2014, the penalty was fairly mild in the respect that it was 1% of your income, and this is above a filing threshold, so it's not your entire income, but 1% of your income or $95, whichever is greater, was the 2014 penalty. So a lot of folks looked at that and just said, oh, well, who cares? It's not much money, so I won't worry about it.
Now, keep in mind, the penalty does not get you anything. It's
Right.
strictly a penalty, a non-tax deductible penalty.
Correct. And that penalty was a major subject of litigation, went all the way to the Supreme Court about whether there was a penalty or a tax, and the Supreme Court sort of decided it was sort of both. And ultimately that provision of the law was upheld. So when you file your 2014 taxes in early 2015, this for many individuals maybe the first time they've even been made aware of the penalty, because a lot of people just sort of tuned out. Now, just bear in mind that for 2015, that penalty more than doubles in the case of the flat dollar amount, which changes from $95 to $295. If I make a mistake, let me know, Mark.
$325 is what this is.
So the penalty goes up. Well, it is adjusted for inflation, so that could be the reason why. Okay. Or 2% of income above the filing threshold, whichever is greater. Now, once again, remember, with all these penalties, it's always the larger amount. So, if your household income is $100,000, then you're not going to be paying $295.
Yeah, $2,000. So, I mean, you can buy a lot of insurance for $2,000.
You can at least buy some insurance for $2,000.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think people get a little too focused on the dollar amount, the fixed penalty, and they forget about the percentage. Now in 2016 that goes up again, and in 2016 the flat dollar amount goes up to $695. Is that still the correct number, or have they adjusted that for inflation already?
That's right. And then it's 2.5% of your household income. So that's, again, most likely for most people that's going to be a higher figure, or for many people.
For many people, it's going to be a higher figure. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time terrifying people about the penalties, other than just to remind you that these penalties exist. And they don't get you anything, so you get absolutely nothing for paying this penalty. Mm-hmm. And if you get insurance, you don't owe the penalty. Now, the really interesting aspect, so, we've, Mark and I think last count, we had signed up over 700 people for individual health plans under the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, so this is part of our business.
This is part of our business, yeah. And the really interesting thing is, for a lot of people, the penalty, particularly in 2015 when the penalty goes up, in 2014 this wasn't necessarily the case, but the penalty could be as much or more than the actual cost of coverage. So this is one of those things that if you're just kind of hanging out there and saying, hey, we'll pay the penalty, that could be a really bad financial decision, because you could end up paying more money for, in effect, nothing, because you get nothing for the penalty. And the reason that that's the case is because many individuals will qualify for what's called the Advanced Premium Tax Credit under the Affordable Care Act, which can dramatically reduce the cost of their individual health insurance. So, there are some families who might be paying less than $100 a month for pretty good health insurance when this tax credit is taken into account. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to pay a penalty for nothing if you can qualify for really low cost coverage.
Well, when we joke about it, this law really benefits larger families. So we kind of jokingly say this law was written for Mormons and Catholics. But it's amazing how much of a tax credit a family of 4 or a family of 5 in the state of Utah can get.
Let's go ahead and just do a 2015 number real quick.
Yeah, and we've got our website. It's EASY, so EASY, www.EASY, A as in apple, C as in cat, A as in apple.com. So easyaca.com. And you can go in and compare both 2014 and 2015 plans. All you have to do is select the state that you live in, obviously Utah, the city the county rather, that you live in, because it is county driven. The household. Go ahead.
So the rates and plans vary from county to county. So, for example, there are certain plans that are available in Salt Lake County that aren't available in Utah County. And you also see a slight premium difference from county to county. So it's really important that if you're looking at these estimates that you get that county information correct. Otherwise, you might not see the correct plans and the rates will almost certainly be incorrect.
So let's just say someone in Salt Lake, a family of 5, 40-year-old mom and dad, and 3 kids under age 20. Not too uncommon
Not
in the
that
state
unusual.
of Utah. So let's use a $50,000 a year household income, which is the other thing that you have to input. You also have to input if you're a tobacco user or not, because that does impact the rates.
In fact, that's the only thing that can impact your rates, other than your age and where you live. They can increase your rate for tobacco use pretty dramatically. So if you needed another reason to quit smoking, there's another one, and that is that they can substantially increase your insurance costs.
So just to give you an idea, a silver level plan. So in this case, there's some cost sharing involved. So for this family of 5 making $50,000 a year, living in Salt Lake County, the subsidy is $550. This is a 2015 calculation. So $550 each month, and that's an advanced premium tax credit. That means you get that tax credit each month. So the insurance company bills you the amount less the tax credit, and they bill the government for the balance. So in this case, it's a $250 plan with Select Health, a major provider of healthcare, and Intermountain Healthcare provider.
Probably the largest individual health insurer in the state, I would speculate.
Yeah. So in this case, it's a $250 deductible. It's normally an $800 a month plan, but the person gets a $550 tax credit. So that family would only be billed $250 per month for that plan.
Right. So you're getting incredibly good coverage.
That's
at
the whole.
a
That's
really
the
low
entire.
cost.
That's the entire family, not each individual. So the entire family for a $250 deductible is paying $250 a month in premium. Again, we want to emphasize that this changes a lot depending upon your household size and depending upon who you're insuring and your income.
Right. And the really ironic thing is that sometimes it can, under the ACA, it can be less expensive to insure more people. And so sometimes I've encountered families where maybe they were only insuring 1 or 2 people in the family because of cost. And when we ran the numbers, when you take the tax credits into account, they can actually cover more people for less money because they get a larger tax credit.
So, for example, that same plan with that same family, only they just had one more child, so they're now up to 4 children. The premium goes down to $206 a month. So it went down even though we're insuring one additional person.
Yeah.
That's because the tax credit is going up at a faster pace than is the cost of insurance.
Than the premium, yeah. And so something just to really keep in mind as an individual, and one of the reasons we're talking about this on our small business program is because, a lot of small business owners, their coverage is an individual health plan. That's how they cover themselves. And a lot of times, if you're a small business owner, you may think, oh, well, I don't qualify for any kind of, assistance or support or anything else. But we actually find that frequently a lot of small business owners do qualify for substantial tax credits because of various capital expenditures that they have in their business or carry forward losses or things like that reduce their taxable earnings.
Yeah, if you're a contractor, talk to us because we've helped a lot of contractors.
Yeah, and so
this.
Don't just assume that say, hey, I own my own business, so there's no way I qualify for these programs. There's actually a good chance you do.
We even helped a business owner. I think he was making about $140,000 a year, and because how many children he had, which was a lot,
an unusually large number.
He was still eligible for a tax credit. So it's interesting how much income you can actually make and still be eligible for this tax credit.
Right. And in particular, once again, we're not talking about your gross income. This is the government uses your modified adjusted gross income, which takes into account various deductions and things like that. So you'd want to talk to your CPA if you're a small business owner and you're looking at this, but there's a really good chance that you could, depending upon what sort of write-downs and things that you have, that you might qualify for the credit.
And we've actually helped hundreds of CPAs get trained on the Affordable Care Act.
Because it's new for them too.
Yeah, and it's very complicated. In fact, there's a lot of insurance brokers that don't understand it who sell health insurance. And the concern there is that they've kind of thinking that the law was going to go away. They didn't get educated on what were the ins and outs, and this is something we've been teaching on since 2 weeks after the law
beginning.
passed. Yeah. So we've trained companies all over the country. We've trained over 10,000 businesses on the Affordable Care Act. So you really do want to work with somebody that understands the law. And one other thing individuals and business owners need to be aware of is healthcare.gov. In order to get the tax credit, you must go through the website healthcare.gov.
Yeah, you can't just claim it at the end of the year,
right?
Because your income turned out to be lower than you expected, or whatever the case might be. You have to plan for it.
All healthcare.gov is a portal in which they can determine what tax credit you're eligible for and allow for that tax credit. If you don't use that, you won't get it. And so you're still buying insurance from a provider of insurance like Select Health or Humana or Altius or Arches or some of these others. And there's over 100 different plans, options. And so
in Salt Lake County, yeah.
And so it can be confusing because you can input information through healthcare.gov and it can actually mess you up. It might force your kids into going into CHIP.
Or think that they're eligible for Medicaid,
which most likely there's a good chance they might not be, especially as a business owner. And so there is no additional cost to use a broker to sign you up. So the way it's written in the law, there's no added fee. So you should really get help from somebody who understands the law and knows how to enroll you through the process. Otherwise, you really can... it can be very difficult, and you can have family members go without coverage for a couple of months until it gets all worked out. So it can be scary.
It can be. And so we're coming up on a break, but just before the break, one other thing I want to mention for individuals that they may not realize, and I don't want to get too much into tax stuff here, but one of the changes under the Affordable Care Act is that it used to be if you were a small business owner and your business was an LLC or an S Corp, you couldn't write off or deduct the entire cost of your health insurance premiums. And so you may say, well, Chris, I don't qualify for a tax credit, so none of this ACA stuff matters to me. Well, let me tell you one thing that does matter to you, and that's that under the Affordable Care Act, you can now deduct, probably, you talk to your CPA, the entire amount that you paid on your family's individual health insurance premiums. It's a page 1 deduction on the 2014 forms. And I mean, this is a huge boon to small business owners. I mean, myself, I don't know what you pay, Mark, but I mean, I pay about $13,000 a year to insure my family. Mm-hmm. I don't qualify for a tax credit. And
right, I don't either.
Because my business are LLCs, there was no real way to write it off, and now there is. So that will help a lot of small business owners, I believe.
So I'm going to leave our contact information because we've got to go to a break, but it's 801-671-2431, 801-671-2431. Go to the website, easyaca.com, or our small to large, small, the number 2, large.com, and we'll come back, talk more about this after the break.
He's just made in America.
As a small business owner, you have questions. Will my cash flow cover expenses? How do I get understandable, actionable reports about my business? What is the best option for raising capital? Clarity CFO is your finance partner that thinks like an entrepreneur. We're all about helping you improve cash flow, meet opportunities with confidence, and grow your business. Visit our website at www.claritycfo.com to receive a free review of your business metrics and to start getting answers to your questions. Cash flow, confidence, growth. Visit claritycfo.com today.
Small business owners and CEOs, where do you turn for objective counsel on your most critical business decisions? How do you assure your personal growth as a CEO? How do you get an unbiased review of your plans and strategic direction? What provisions are you making for perpetuation of your business beyond yourself? For over 20 years, CEO Builder has been the answer to these questions for many Utah CEOs. Join us for a complimentary forum or coaching session through our website at www.ceobuilder.com.
As a small business owner, you are not just building a business, you're building a legacy. Let the attorneys at Callister, Nebaker, and McCullough counsel and assist you as you navigate the legal complexities of organizing, financing, and operating a successful business. At Callister, Nebaker, and McCullough, we build, cultivate, and defend legacies. Your business, your family, your future. To learn more about how we can help, call 801-530-7300 or visit us online at cnmlaw.com. That's cnmlaw.com.
It's tough for small businesses to keep up with all the new regulations, the new healthcare law, employee handbooks, human resources, OSHA safety, employment discrimination and harassment, business insurance, workers' compensation. It is all so complicated. Most business owners are doing their best just to make a small profit. If there were only a simplified way to manage all of this, now there is. Summit Risk Management in Insurance can show you how. www.summit-risk.com. That's summit-risk.com.
All right, we're back. And before our break, we were really talking about individuals and individual coverage. Let's talk about businesses with employees now. And as Mark mentioned at the beginning of the program, there's really kind of two types of employer under the Affordable Care Act. There's what's called an applicable large employer, or ALE. Under the law, these were employers with 50 or more full-time equivalents. Now, there's been some tinkering on the margins to kind of make that 100 for this year. We're not really going to get into all that because it's very complicated.
Call us if you have questions. We'll help you.
If you're in that 50 to 100 range and you're trying to figure out, am I a large employer for this year or not, you should call us.
There's an analysis, a free analysis that we're able to help a lot of businesses out with. So just give us a call and we can talk to you about that.
But let's talk about those small employers because that's really our target. Those employers that are under 50 full-time equivalents.
Before we jump to that, let's just make note that the employer mandate, where the employer gets a penalty if they don't provide coverage, there's a chance that could go away. So if there's anything that could go away, that's probably the first on the chopping block.
Right.
So we'll see what happens as of January, which is when January 2015, which is when the first penalty kicks in if you have more than 100 full-time equivalents.
Right.
So it'll be kind of interesting to see what the new Senate makeup and Congress do with this.
Yeah, I think that the employer mandate is the part of the law that's the most likely to change for a couple reasons. One, it's not really going to result in many people getting insurance. And I think that's become clear.
It's created a lot of part-time jobs that used to be full-time.
I think everyone's heard of employers who have reduced hours over a year ago because this was delayed, and employers were already making these decisions where it's caused a lot of people, they're not going to get coverage. They just got their hours cut. So I think that's one reason.
Which eliminates tax base, by the way. So politicians don't like that.
And it creates, so it really isn't having the desired effect. The other thing is there just doesn't seem to be anybody who supports it anymore. Even in the administration, there doesn't really seem to be anybody out there saying, oh, the employer mandate is really critical for this whole thing to work. And so I think that with the change in Congress and the lack of enthusiasm on the part of the administration, there's a reasonable chance.
So this is our opinion.
This is our opinion. There's a reasonable chance of all the things that could change. The whole law is not going to get repealed. I'm sorry. If you're counting on that, it's not going to happen. But the employer mandate, I could see that one going away.
All right, so let's talk about small employers. So small employers who have less than 50 employees were never required to provide health insurance coverage.
Right.
And historically, the reason why they've done it is because their employees, it's required to get good quality people.
Right. If I want to attract and retain good talent, sponsoring a health plan was one of the things that I would do. So it varied a lot from industry to industry. If I was in an industry where I could hire any minimum wage person, replace them at any moment and suffer no harm, I probably didn't sponsor a health plan to begin with.
But why why not just give your employees more money? The reason why is because many people, it used to be before the Affordable Care Act, before 2014, January 1st, you couldn't just go out automatically and get coverage because 50% of people roughly were turned down because of pre-existing conditions. So subsequently, the whole impetus or large impetus for an employer to provide an employer-sponsored plan was because the employee couldn't go out and get it on their own.
Right, and this was really just a strange way that the insurance market had come about over the last 50 years. Because of underwriting, which is the process by which an insurance company would evaluate a risk, insurance companies wouldn't insure people who represented a really high risk. And what that resulted in is that, half or maybe more of individuals who would apply for individual health insurance would either get turned down entirely, rated up, or the things would be excluded that were wrong with them.
Right. So all of that has gone away.
All of that is
January.
gone. So anybody can get insured. There's no pre-existing condition.
Now, there is times that you can get insured, though. So you can't just any time go out and get insurance. So if you
can't buy insurance on the way to the hospital.
That's right. So there's certain times that's why we're in open enrollment right now.
So employers sponsored health plans because the various laws were structured in a way that under an employer-sponsored health plan, you got rid of a lot of that pre-existing condition stuff. People couldn't be turned down. They couldn't be individually rated up. And so employers sort of became the providers of insurance simply because that was the only way that a lot of people could get insurance.
So here's the interesting caveat. The change has happened now that if an employer is offering coverage to their employees, a small or large employer, but let's talk about small, because small, you're not being required to offer it. If you offer coverage to your employees, they are unable to get the tax credits through the exchange or the marketplace or healthcare.gov. So subsequently, we have a situation where the employee could get frustrated because they're not able to get that tax credit. So for example, let's say this employee is paying their premiums $800 a month for their family and their tax credit's almost $600 a month. Even if the employer is contributing $200 a month towards the premium, they're still out of pocket $600 a month.
So they would still be better off if the employer didn't sponsor a health plan, which is really bizarre because employers have been sponsoring health plans at great expense, great frustration, great liability for all of these years because it was a benefit. But now sponsoring a health plan could actually be hurting your employees in an ironic twist because of the Affordable Care Act.
Yes. So that's the concern, is that if in an analysis, a true analysis has to take place in order for an employer to determine if they're actually hurting their employees by offering them health care coverage, which is a new concept to business owners.
And so just last week, we helped a small company in Lehigh. They had about, 10 employees, not a big company, but they'd sponsored a group health plan like a lot of small companies do because they thought it was the best thing to do for their employees. Well, when we went through and we helped a lot of these individuals switch on to individual policies.
Well, we did an analysis first to determine what was the best approach. They determined it was best to terminate their plan as an employer.
Because the majority of the employees would be substantially better off if the employer eliminated the plan. And that's really what it comes down to. There's always going to be an outlier here or there who's not going to benefit as much as someone else.
But there are things that employers can still do to help contribute towards the cost and still offer benefits if they choose to do so.
They can't directly contribute, but you can always give people an increase in wages through a healthcare stipend. You can make contributions to a health savings account if an employee purchases qualifying coverage. You can offer other types of benefits. There's a firm that we helped recently that had about 35 or 40 employees that when they got rid of their health plan, they decided that they would add in vision and life and dental and an employee assistance program and a bunch of other tax-free benefits to kind of make up for the fact that they got rid of the health plan.
Mm-hmm. And so if an employer does terminate their plan after the analysis is done and they determine that they're better off, part of the analysis, by the way, you have to factor in the cost if an employer is going to contribute towards that plan to determine that now counts as income towards the employee and can actually reduce the amount of their tax credit. So you have to factor in that. You also have to factor in that the employer is going to be paying the matching taxes on those dollars that before they were able to run with no taxes. It was all
pre-tax, no tax on that.
And so there are a number of different considerations for small employers to determine this, but many employers, I would say somewhere in the 70-75% range, the employers are better off terminating the plan. The employees are better off terminating the plan. Their families are better off terminating the plan. They can now get the tax credits. The employer eliminates a huge liability, not just with the cost of health insurance, but let's say an employee fills out an enrollment form to come onto the plan and it somehow gets buried in paperwork, never gets turned into the insurance company. That employee has a car accident or they have a heart attack, 2-3 months later, they're not going to be able to come onto the insurance. They've missed their window of opportunity on a small employer plan, and now the employer is completely liable for that expense, which under the ACA, there's no limit on the benefit. So it could put a small business out of business very quickly.
And that's one of the things that we've counseled employers on for a long time. I mean, going back at least a decade, which is, hey, when you decided to sponsor that health plan, you just thought you were just helping to pay for insurance. You didn't really think about the legal liability that you were assuming when you chose to do that.
Not just that, but under ERISA law, there's virtually no employer that we've come across in our audit process that is in compliance with ERISA law and all the SPDs, summary plan descriptions that are required to distribute to the employees, the COBRA administration if you have more than 20 employees in the preceding calendar year, and even even in Utah with mini COBRA, there's potential liability, and then HIPAA law and potentially Section 125 of the IRS code. There's substantial exposure to employers when offering a employer-sponsored plan. Now, that's not to say every employer should terminate their employer-sponsored plan, but
they should at least know what the risks are,
right?
So they can manage them.
So they can manage that risk, exactly. But for small employers, especially in maybe blue-collar industries, it's almost always better for the employer and the employee for them to terminate the plan.
And so we really believe, and this is where we're getting into opinion again, but we've seen other people pick up on this. I mean, we were talking about this 1.5 years, 2 years ago, maybe even further back than that we really believe that over the next couple of years, you'll see very few small employers sponsoring health plans. It will be unusual for a small employer to sponsor a health plan.
Why should you if you're hurting your employees by doing so?
If the government, and you can debate the merits of the government's involvement in this all you want, but the reality is they're doing it. And so if the government's willing to pay for something, why should you pay for it?
Government meaning we the people.
Well, but the point is that if you cannot directly bear the expense, see, we're all going to indirectly bear the expense whether we like it or not.
Right.
You know, we can't opt out of any potential tax increase or economic consequences associated with all of this. So if we can't opt out of that, why should we bear an expense, a direct expense that we don't have to bear?
Especially if our competitor's not. So we're trying to compete against that other business. They're getting their employees coverage through individual plans, and the employees are better off. They're saving, the employer's saving money because they're not contributing as much or any towards the health plan. And now I'm trying to compete against that employer, and I'm trying to provide a health plan.
Right.
It's
and
difficult
you can't
to
pay that higher wage that other employer is paying because you're bearing that expense. Now let's talk. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some other issues here, which is you as an employer can't just go out and buy a bunch of individual policies for your employees.
No, you cannot.
So let's just make that absolutely clear that that's not what we're talking about.
And there is an organization in the state of Utah who is promoting that employers through health reimbursement arrangements are able to contribute towards those individual premiums without tax dollars.
And that's hugely problematic, which we can't get into on the radio, but we'd be happy to talk to you about it. But what an employer can do is an employer can make their employees aware of the marketplace. In fact, you're obligated by law to make your employees aware of the marketplace.
Not just your existing employees. Every new hire within 14 days has to be notified with a specific form.
And there's nothing wrong with you saying, hey, since we're getting rid of our health plan, here are some agents you can talk to, or you can go and do it on your own, or whatever, however you want to do it, that can help you set up that new coverage. The key for the employer is that your hands really have to be off at that point. You can't help people pick plans. You can't directly pay for their premiums. You can't do any of that. You have to really be hands off, which as an employer, that's where you want to be. I mean, why do you want to be involved in people's health insurance anyway? I mean, it's not really what you got in business for. So I just want to make that part clear. So as an employer, you shouldn't just go out and sign your employees up for a bunch of individual health plans. That would be a bad idea.
Right. And you can never make your employees happy, right? I mean, all employers who have had plans know what that's like. You try to pick a plan. The plan is for the whole company. And there's always somebody who doesn't like it, no matter what plan you pick.
Their doctor isn't in the network. Their prescription isn't covered. They wanted a higher deductible, lower deductible. I mean, there's always...
You name it. So in this scenario, the individuals can go out and we can anyone can assist them that's qualified, but we certainly can assist them. We'll do our shameless plug. And by the way, we're Summit Risk Management and Insurance. That's the core business that I'm in, Mark Hunter. And so those individuals or the companies can contact Summit Risk Management, and our website is summit-risk.com, and we can help set that up for employers. So.
Sure, yeah. And so we've got a little bit more time, so let's just talk about some other considerations regarding small businesses and healthcare costs. And And we mentioned that, it is a viable option for a lot of employers just to eliminate their plan altogether. Now, it is open enrollment period now, which is going to, encourage more employers to take a look at this. But one thing that companies need to realize is that you don't have to, if you decide to terminate your plan, let's say your renewal doesn't come up for another 6 months and you're okay with the way things are right now, you don't have to do it right now if you don't want to do it right now. Anytime an employer terminates a health plan, the employees who were on that plan have a 60-day special enrollment period where they could go on to one of these new individual plans. And so we've been helping folks with this throughout the year.
Yeah. And the employees still get the tax credit in this situation, so long as they sign up within that window.
Right. So first of all, don't think that, oh my gosh, this is something I have to do right away. Now, I will tell you, though, that there are some advantages to making this decision this time of year. And one of those is that if you have employees who, if let's say you decide to cancel your plan halfway through the year, who have already met their deductibles or their out-of-pocket limits or things like that, it can be somewhat disruptive if you just sort of pull the rug out from under them in the middle of the year and they have to start over with a new health plan, whether it be an individual health plan or a group health plan. Either way, it can be very disruptive. So if you're in the case where you think that you might that you're, hey, in March or February, March, we'll take care of this. Well, you might want to move that up and look at it a little earlier in the year, just so that your employees aren't meeting those expenses out of the old plan.
And it could be, in July too, but it's whenever it's right for the employer. That's just one of the considerations that they should take into consideration as the employees' deductibles, as Chris mentioned. What are some other things, Chris, we can talk about?
Well, you really have to look at the compensation of your workers and sort of what the family size is. Now, this is something that a lot of times an employer doesn't just automatically know. You don't know what family size is. You don't know what household income is. That's one of the things that Mark was talking about when we help a company do an evaluation. We ask them. But I would say in general, tech sector, not really the place where you see a lot of companies dropping their plans, because oftentimes you've got younger, more highly compensated workers who don't necessarily have big families, in which case they're not going to get these same huge benefits.
Now, there are some things that an employer could do to help the employee who's not eligible for a tax credit.
Sure, there are. So an employer can set up an arrangement by which the employee, and we don't actually see many people doing this, but it can be done, where the employee can fund their individual insurance premiums with pre-tax dollars through what's called a Section 125 plan. And that is something that is out there. A lot of times we don't see companies do that because so many employees qualify for the tax credit. There's only one or two or a handful who are paying the full unsubsidized premium. That's not really worth it. But in those sectors where you have higher wages, that's certainly the case. There's actually a company that we're talking to later this week, I think, that's got 100 or so. They had 150 partners. Is that how you would describe it? They're not really employees because they're all really self-employed.
Yeah.
Where they've been sponsoring a group health plan and because these are all partners in the firm, they would probably all be much better off just buying individual policies and getting the full write-off on their individual taxes, which is a huge change from what used to be the case.
Many of them won't qualify for tax credits, but they still get to be able to write it off, where they haven't been able to do that because they're not a C corporation.
Right, and this is getting into really arcane stuff here. But in general, if you're a small business owner, you may have been frustrated in the past, like I said, by the fact that your premiums weren't fully deductible. And depending upon how you structure things, they may now be fully deductible, which could be a huge savings. I mean, if you've got a family and you're like me and you're paying, $11, $12, maybe more $1,000 a year on premiums, I mean, that's a big deduction that you can potentially get now. And so that's a big deal, even when the tax credits don't come into account. One other thing that we didn't really talk a lot about earlier is that in addition to the tax credits that are available to some employees, there's also what's called a cost sharing reduction, which is something that's a little harder to quantify because the tax credit is something that directly reduces the monthly cost, the premium. All right. But a lot of folks, and we found that, I don't know, more than half of the people we've signed up qualify for this cost-sharing reduction. And what the cost-sharing reduction does is it allows an individual to buy a plan that, let's say, would normally have $1,000 deductible. And this is what Mark was talking about earlier. Those rates that he was giving for that family of 5 or 6 or whatever the numbers were, That was actually for a plan that had a $1,000 deductible and 50% coinsurance, which is a decent plan, but not an amazing plan. Because of the cost-sharing reduction that family qualified for, their deductible was reduced to $250, and their cost-sharing was reduced, I think, to 15% instead of 50%. So that makes a huge difference. So it allows a family to buy what would normally be a pretty not an inexpensive, but sort of a middle plan, and get benefits that they would only normally get with a really expensive plan.
Well, it also reduces the max out of pocket for those people. So
Right.
that's something consideration that again we evaluate when we look at this whole scenario. So just want to again put out our contact information. My cell phone is 801-671-2431. That's Mark Hunter.
And mine, Chris Brown, is 801-243-8331. This is a really busy time of year, so if you'd like help, whether with your company or on an individual basis, just give us a call and we'll get back to you.
And a lot of companies are going to see big increases, maybe not this year, but next year, because they'll go into what's called community rating, which we didn't really have time to talk about. But if you're a small business, you definitely want to ask us about community rating and how that could potentially hugely negatively impact your business to the tune of a 40-50% rate increase on your health insurance.
Which can really change the dynamics dramatically. Well, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you a little bit at the end of the show.
It's time for this week's First Utah Business Spotlight.
Mark Hunter here with Small to Large on K-Talk Radio, and today we're here with Dr. Goff with the Rocky Mountain Retina Consultants, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So Dr. Goff, tell us what RMRC does. What do you do for your patients?
Sure. So Rocky Mountain Retina Consultants is a group of 3 retina specialists, and we serve 4 states with 6 clinics. We have offices here in Utah, we have offices in Nevada, and Montana and Wyoming.
Wow.
So we're very geographically spread, and we provide comprehensive retina service to our patients.
But you're corporately headquartered here in Utah?
Right, our main office is here in Salt Lake City.
Okay. And we're off of, 7th East and about 45th South?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
The services we offer, again, are comprehensive care, medical and surgical, for the posterior part of the eye, for the retina and the anything in the back part of your eye.
Okay.
We also have a diagnostic testing center that we can talk about that we offer to other doctors in the community, where we will perform diagnostic testing and interpret those tests. And then we have a very active clinical research program where we enroll patients in clinical trials.
Let's talk about that. Tell us about the clinical trials. What are those for?
Well, clinical trials are generally to examine new drugs and technologies and see if they are safe and effective for patients. Mm-hmm. There are many diseases in the field of retina that there is an unmet need to take care of these diseases, and we're trying to discover if these newer medicines are helpful. So, for example, right now we're involved in numerous trials, mostly for diabetic disease in the back of the eye and for age-related macular degeneration. There are a couple of forms of age-related macular degeneration, a dry form and a wet form. The wet form has some very effective treatments now, and we are in some clinical trials looking at newer ones. But the dry form, you may be aware, there really isn't any effective treatment for that to date, and we're involved in a clinical trial looking at drugs that hopefully someday will provide a new, novel treatment for dry macular degeneration.
Well, that's great. So what is the result of that for people who are listening and watching this? What if I had that disease? What could I expect?
Are you macular degeneration?
Yes.
Well, macular degeneration is a disease where you accumulate waste material in the back of your eye. The back of your eye is lined with the retina, which is kind of like the film in a camera. Mm-hmm. And the center of your retina is the macula. And if you accumulate these waste materials back there, it can interfere with your vision. And sometimes these waste materials can lead to bleeding, and that's the wet form of the disease.
Oh, okay.
If patients who get this, they get blurry vision right in the center. And if they get the wet form, that's even worse. The wet form causes very severe vision loss, often abrupt onset, and it can be really frightening.
And is that just
debilitating?
Is that just bleeding in the eye? Is that where it's taking place? So it's not necessarily visual on the outside of the...
Right, it's not visible on the outside. It's deep in there. It's in the retina.
Okay.
So you wouldn't see anything looking at the patient, but when they're looking out, the center of their vision can be very, very blurry. And again, it can be severe with the wet form, disabling and frightening. So that's what people would experience. If they just have the dry form, then they may just have mild symptoms, a little bit of blurriness in the center, and this can go on for decades. Macular degeneration is extremely common. It's around 15 million Americans have age-related macular degeneration.
So, so what procedures do you perform then in your clinic here, or in your office, or at the hospital? I'm not sure where you perform your surgery.
Sure. So there are a lot. We do procedures both in the office and in an operating room. Macular degeneration, the current treatment for the wet form of that is injections of medication into your eye.
It just sounds painful.
It does. It sounds really crazy, doesn't it? Everybody was taught not to poke a needle in your eye.
Yeah.
But that's the current treatment, and man, it's so effective. Before these medications were approved, which was about the year 2006, there was very limited treatment for wet macular degeneration. In fact, when I was a resident, if patients developed this, you would tell them, there's not much we can do. We can laser this, and that alone will cause loss of vision, but it might stop it from getting worse. But that's about it. You can look forward to very poor central vision for the rest of your life.
So you've explained to us what you do, so I'm interested, you're in the medical field, so what's it like being in the medical field and running a small business?
Well, it's a challenge for sure. You get out of medical school and you think that you're going to practice medicine and that's all you have to worry about.
Right.
My goodness, that's the farthest thing from the truth.
They need a couple classes on running a business at medical school, right?
They need any classes. Even one would be a tremendous benefit, yeah. Running the business is, without a question, the most challenging part of my job, and I think that would be true for most physicians who are in an ownership position.
Yeah.
There are new challenges with decreased reimbursements, changing laws, regarding healthcare, regarding compliance, regarding privacy. They're complex and they change constantly. So it is very difficult, and you have to keep on top of it to remain profitable. And in medicine, we are at a little bit of a disadvantage from the get-go because we're not trained for that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of learning on the job.
So has the Affordable Care Act impacted you much then in your business?
It's kind of early to tell. We all whine about it,
Yeah.
But I think we whine because of change and uncertainty.
Sure.
So,
all right. Well, Dr. Goff, we appreciate you being on our show today. Thank you very much.
it's been my pleasure.
All right.
There are 5 key questions every successful business owner asks every day. How can we increase innovation? How can we reduce operating costs? How can we grow our sales and market share? How can we create new products and stay cutting edge? And how can we improve our cash flow? By Monday's Howcanology web app answers all of those questions by empowering your employees to become valuable, producing entrepreneurs. Contact By Monday at 801-225-1600 to learn more about Howcanology.
As a small business owner, I have struggled with controlling my workers' compensation costs. Some of my injured workers have really taken advantage of the system, costing me an arm and a leg, no pun intended. I finally found someone who can help, Summit Risk Management and Insurance. They have saved my company thousands of dollars on my insurance costs and have improved my safety program. I recommend them to any business owner. www.summit-risk.com. That's summit-risk.com.
If you own a small business, you've experienced problems with technology. lost files, server crash, blue screen of death. It always means one thing: an IT nightmare that keeps you from running your business. IT Now keeps those IT nightmares at bay. IT Now is the leading provider of professional IT services for small and medium businesses. Call IT Now today for a free network evaluation, and soon you could be nightmare-free and experience the bliss of things running as they should. 801-562-8778.
Phil, your golf game is amazing. Where do you find the time?
I've been using ADP for my business, the world leader in payroll services. I manage my payroll, retirement plan, and HR all on my iPad, mobile app, or with a quick phone call. It's easy and really affordable.
I'm just so busy. Sounds great. How do I get a quote?
Call Dave at 800-422-3705. He's been with ADP here in Utah for 15 years.
Thanks. That number was 800-422-3705.
All right. Well, what another fascinating local business there at the Rocky Mount Retina Consultants. And we're out of time again. That's that time of the show, and we just want to wrap things up. I'll remind you we'll be here again next week, same time, same channel, and we're going to have Vincent Michelet from the governor's office talking about economic development in the state. Everybody just have a great day, and keep growing, Utah.